Calayde Davey is my guest today on Future Cities Africa. She's co-founder and director of urban strategy at Regen 50, and she co-chairs of the Lean Built Environment Afrika. Calayde, welcome. We have a lot to talk about. Let's start with your background and current roles at Regen 50 and Lean Built Environment Afrika.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here. Yes, my name is Calayde Davey. I have a strange history. I have a master's degree in architecture that I got in South Africa. And then I traveled around the world a little bit, and I went and worked in architecture in Asia and Kuala Lumpur for a while. And I also did my PhD in the US in planning and environmental design. And I also did a stint in real estate and lean design and construction in the USA. And since then, I've been back in South Africa doing that kind of work here as well.
One of our themes for this discussion is digital twins. What exactly is a digital twin? Why is it so critical? Can you mention a few real-world examples? And what are some of the challenges to implementation?
Sure. A digital twin is a very popular research area at the moment for very, very many reasons. A digital twin is a virtual simulation of the real world, either through a phenomenon or an object or a process or anything else. You can think of virtual twins as something like a Fitbit for your body. It measures real-time or close to real-time reactions and occurrences that is going on around you. And then you can use that Fitbit instruction to monitor your health or change things and make adaptations. So in the design and construction world, the digital twin space is closely associated with BIM, Building Information Management Environments. But a building information management environment is still a static environment. It is still a retrospective or an environment does not change. So in the world of design and construction, BIM or modeling is still static. But in the world of digital twins, this environment is a dynamic environment that also changes. It imitates as well as reports on. So you can think of digital twins closer to the Google Maps environment, where you know where all cars are at all times on a map. And a digital twin for built environment is a lot like that. So in the examples you can get is real-time flood management, for example, in cities. How we can monitor pipes and flood management and flood plains and flood events. So when you start coupling weather data and smart devices or instruments to your geographic space, you get closer to a Fitbit for cities. And that's kind of what we are interested in. We're interested in the Fitbit for cities. And some of the examples that digital twins are very popular with is, like I said, flood management, but it's very popular in crime control. For example, if you can start monitoring users and access and devices and situations in space in real time, it's a very popular instrument for more mature cities to have it in a crime control setting. And this is probably one of the most interesting advantages we could have in South Africa as well. The biggest challenge is not the demand for twins, but the availability of open data and data that is really accessible and data that is at scale. In South Africa, we have a culture and practice of protecting data in a way, in a quite restrictive way, whereas our competitors overseas are much more open about making data public. And in South Africa, that's one of the biggest obstacles is not the instrument, but the information that is consistent or usable easily. That is our biggest obstacle.
And how do you propose we fix that? Who needs to fix it?
There's lots of avenues that we can go down. The first one is to acknowledge that data is public anyway, and to be proprietary about things like streets and cities and buildings and where people go isn't really a private issue anymore, because we can see that and Google tracks it anyway. So the first thing we have to overcome is that data isn't private anymore regardless, and we're already living in smart cities. The second thing is that we should be much more open with sharing data amongst private institutions to public institutions. This is the must-have move that South African cities must make. to be sharing data freely. There's a misunderstanding that data means power. It's how you use data that means power, and this is a shift we have to make as a culture and as a profession. And the last one is we are underutilizing our universities to a great degree. If we were to be smart about this, we would have tens of thousands of students who can update public data as they go through the process of education anyway. And that would be a low-hanging fruit scenario where we could get public data really sophisticated really fast if we build those partnerships.
Are there any international countries that's quite advanced at this stage that we can learn from?
Yes, obviously the northern hemisphere is much more sophisticated in this because they have more mature cities and they have more smaller societies and larger data sets that are consistent. So they are usually in the lead. The number one kinds of environments I'm talking about is Singapore city or in the Scandinavian cities and so on. New Zealand is incredibly progressive when it comes to this as well. I'm not sure how sophisticated they are yet, but I know that they're actively engaging in digital twins and spatial data planning issues. And in the general South, there are lots of interesting projects, but usually bespoke and not comprehensive. So you'll have a project about a transportation twin devoid of a social issue twin. So there are some examples in the developing countries, but they are also seeing the same obstacles like I was just describing about the data and accessibility to data. Yeah, but the use cases are diverse. So a digital twin isn't a single thing. It is completely designed to the objective of the city or the building or the asset owner or the business case. So the digital twin is an instrument as broad as a set of pencils. It could be any color. It could be a twin for any purpose or a color that you need it to be. It is about how you manage and visualize dynamic work.
How do you think digital twins or a digital twin could have helped us better prepare for COVID-19? I know you can run a lot of simulations and scenarios with digital twins. If we had something in place, could we do something? Would this be easier?
Well, I've seen experiments with digital twins is very new in terms of the city space. There's a lot of digital twin history in terms of modeling, but dynamic cities is a 10-year-old conversation if you think of it in this way. But in the case of COVID, if I've seen experiments where cell phone tracking aids in social distancing, for example, and a digital twins environment could allow you to be much more alert to that kind of thing. Because a cell phone is pretty much now our proxy body. For many people, our cell phones are our digital twins for intensive purposes. So in terms of COVID, there could have been lots more done in terms of educating a broader spectrum of people through other media, other than social media, because everyone has a cell phone these days, including African and poorer populations. So that would be a really useful case. The other one is traveling and grouping and crime and anything that clusters with a cell phone. It would be a use case for a digital twin. And if you can imagine our cities, the migrancy patterns, for example, in COVID, where I work a lot with student populations. So when COVID occurred, a lot of our students' housing situations changed dramatically. Migrancy issues, rapid migrancy, et cetera, we didn't even know where the populations were migrating to and what their level of data or access to connectivity back and forth between institutions were. But if you were plugged into a twin, you might not have to be plugged into a geographic space. In other words, you don't have to be in the Johannesburg area to be part of the Johannesburg twin, for example. And this kind of advantages could be tremendous. The other thing could have been things like alleviating burden for individuals. In COVID, a lot of people took on more burden, financial burden, as they lost access to opportunities or their situations changed dramatically. And in the same way, a lot of people started building on communities more. Now, if you had digital twin communities, and not even cities, communities, you could build incentive procedures in to alleviate some financial stress for persons. For example, if you started shopping together and sharing utilities, or you could be very creative with how you could have helped people with mortgages or rents to counterbalance that. It's that kind of potential. In the African space, we have large numbers at the bottom of the pyramid, and these are the opportunities that we can take advantage of technologically.
What level of community buy-in do we need to make this a reality? A lot of people are skeptic about new technologies, and especially tracking them. Is there a way that the industry should collaborate to include communities in this decision making?
It depends on what level of society we are engaging with. So if we're in an infrastructure project, the community and stakeholder group is very different than I am in a neighborhood scale project. Or if I'm in a commercial or retail setup, the community is very important, but it's also very different. So you first have to really identify who benefits. If you start with where the use case is and who gets the value out of the twin, those are the communities that care and matter in that setting. So the twinning environment happens regardless whether or not you are volunteering for it, because you are engaged with the internet. Doesn't matter who you are, you're already in someone else's simulation, whether you're wanting it or not. So permission isn't really the issue. The benefits is. It's like, by participating, does the customer and the client and the value stream really get benefit out of it? It's an opt-in, it's an opt-out kind of situation more than it's an opt-in. And also the use case matters. If you're doing wind simulations through the CBD and you do it in a digital twins fashion, it doesn't really matter to the guy on the ground what you're doing there. So it really depends on the use case.
On to topic number 2, lean design and construction. Can you explain the lean design and construction principle, why it is important, and what's stopping Africa from adopting lean?
Sure. So lean design and construction is a domain area that I picked up in the United States, in real estate and design and construction. However, the history of lean is very, very rich, and it comes from originally from the Japanese industrial culture. And it was one of the reasons that the Japanese industries or companies, select companies, really excelled and pulled themselves out of quite a depressive state after the world wars. And in short, what happened is it's a way of working as opposed to a technological solution. And this is a way of working that teaches people how to innovate while working, not before or after the fact. And it really focuses on the moment and the processes of working. And this happens to translate to lean design and construction, but it has a rich history in other sectors. It's very popular and it's dominant in the manufacturing space. It's also very popular, and you can find it in IT and insurance and media and process-oriented industries a lot. It might have a cousin called Agile. And in lean design and construction, the focus is on the person improving while doing the work. And in African context, this is very important because the education system doesn't gear us well enough to be able to adapt and be resilient to work changes and be innovative in our work settings. There's a lot of reasons our education is good for us, but there's also a lot of things it's missing. And that is this dynamicism and being active and providing leadership in the moment of working. And the lean practices have a lot of technical practices where you can learn how to be a technical expert at certain things like continuous estimation or 4D construction, you name it. But most of it is human focused, human development and human potential focused, and training behaviors that you adopt and become part of your bodily ethos of working.
And talking about future cities, is your picture of future cities, is it a dire picture? Are you scared, or are you very optimistic?
Mixed bag. South Africa has a diverse group of cities and interests that their cities pursue. The Cape Town environment is very different to the Ekurhuleni environment. Durban is very different to Tshwane. The politics are very different. So to straightforward, I can't say hot or not, but I can say that those who want to engage will be successful. those who are going to monitor, who are going to visualize the work they do through instruments like digital twins or instruments available to them will be more successful because they will have a competitive advantage that will alleviate their burdens and overheads by a factor of 10. So by an example, if you put together the concept of digital twins and Lean just means not fat. It's not an acronym. It has no other meaning. It just means get rid of the thing that doesn't work and work on the thing that does. And that's the driving idea behind it. Now, if you put together digital twins and you consider the African municipal state and the state of the built environment at large, there's a lot of excess fat in our systems, and twinning or visualization of these problems will probably reduce our burdens by quite a lot. In New Zealand, I was just reading up on how they moved from the 1980s to today in 40 years. And they took a hard lean approach. They said, well, what is the cost of financing and running cities and projects and infrastructure in our nation? And for example, they cut jobs from 17,000, I think was on transit, to 17. So now that kind of impact meant that from 17,000 to 17 means that the bulk of the population were free to go back into the private sector, which was more rewarding, more work, more jobs, more innovation, etc. And the government was cheap to run. And that was the one department. So it's that kind of radicalization that could be possible for us because we're very cluttered and we have a lot of inefficiency in our processes, never mind in our delivery of work, which is a different story. But in our processes alone, if we can consider how to trim the fat and focus on visualizing how work flows through our cities, I think that the benefit is tremendous.
So to ensure that there's a bright future for South African cities and African cities, there's a lot of different stakeholder groups that need to collaborate and work together. There are challenges at the moment with stakeholder collaboration. What do you think are some of the key challenges that must be overcome? And do you have any ideas of how we can overcome those?
The biggest issue with stakeholder collaboration is that we have to create the jobs for maintaining these programs in a way that is sustainable. So there's a lot of times you start stakeholder collaboration work. The emotional enthusiasm could or couldn't be aligned with the vision of what you want to achieve. But because we don't actually create capacity for role players to pursue and dedicate to that job, that whatever the enthusiasm or opposition is, remains emotional instead of becoming operational. So my biggest interest is to create positions and titles specific to get the to keep the momentum and execute work projects specifically. We have too many portfolios that are diverse and split. One person has a very large portfolio, and I don't think this is very effective for what we need to do. We need to move faster. We don't have time for 5-year plans. We need 5-month solutions. And in this way, you need 5-man champions. And we need to develop people who are able to commit in shorter terms with more commitment, and they should be rewarded and paid well for that work. That is usually the thing that collapses stakeholder engagement if you're talking at a community level. When you're talking at a very high level, the problem is generally that people don't understand what problem they're working on. They typically work on a problem that is coming from a private or personal subjective perspective, as opposed to a collective perspective. And this skews stakeholder participation and the outcomes, what you are looking for, greatly. So the biggest concern is, do people understand what they're working on? Can they see a joint future, or is it a situation where you are actually just making sure that nothing catches fire? And so that is the skill set I think we want to build into our cities and governances, as well as in our private sector, to be able to commit to seeing the health of this social technology, that's what it is, to keep people socially aligned, is a social technologist skill set. That is, I think, the most useful investment we can make.
Finally, you're an accomplished musician. I think it's the violin that I saw when Googling a few things about you. How do you keep your hobbies going and maintain a work-life balance?
Accomplish is a very complimentary word, but I do play the instrument, and I've played my whole life. So I grew up with music. My dad's a musician. My whole family is some kind of artist or strange person. So it's very easy for me because I'm always engaged in that environment. I usually am focused on this issue of cities and urbanism and how to move forward. But yeah, I believe in strong work-life balance. Don't work unless you are adding value. That's something that is very important to me. So I'd rather shut down the laptop and the screen every day at 6, making sure I added value that day, than working midnight hours. That's how I approach a healthy life balance.